One of the most important skills that you can take from English 111 from this class, it's a skill that will be expected of you in every class you take here at Germana and beyond, and every paper you write from here on out. And that skill is the art of using the text, how to summarize, paraphrase, and directly quote from an outside source. Um, and it's a skill that I say that is incredibly important because with academic writing, it is expected, it is an expectation for you to engage with the words and ideas of primary and secondary sources. And of course, as you guys saw in the notes earlier, a primary source is a text that you are analyzing. So, for example, for this class, for your literary analysis, your primary source is going to be one of the three short stories that we're reading this semester. So that's a primary source. And a secondary source um, is a piece that is written about a primary source or any other kind of outside research. So engaging with and using outside sources, incorporating the words of others into your writing is a convention of academic writing. And in order to do that without plagiarism, you can do that in one of three ways, like I just said: summary, paraphrase, and direct quotation. And the first, you guys are pretty intimately familiar with, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but it's summary. And summary, you guys, like when I asked you all to write the summary of Kathleen Fitzpatrick, hashtag shame on you, what you were basically doing was shortening the length of this 3-page article into your own words and boil it down to maybe one or two sentences. So a summary, like I just said, shortens the length from the original. It uses your own words, right? You can't use any of the author's words, otherwise you have to quote them appropriately. But you use your own words. It leaves out any kind of opinion, analysis, or subjective thought, right? It just gives kind of an overview of what a text is about or what a text is suggesting, and highlights the main points, the main argument. And the one thing that you want to make sure that you do when you summarize, and I said this to a number of you in your actual summary response, is you want to give credit to the source. So according to so and so, Tim O'Brien explains the scene of X, Y, and Z. So you want to make sure that you give those phrases of attribution because it indicates that those are someone else's thoughts or someone else's words versus yours. To kind of beat my dead horse just one more time, um, if I'm asking you to summarize the short story, The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, you want to make sure that you acknowledge that it's the story, The Things They Carried, and the author, Tim O'Brien, because you didn't write the story, Tim O'Brien did. So summaries, they are short, 1 to 2 sentences. They're in your own words, and they highlight the main points by giving, it also gives credit to the source, either by mentioning the title and or the author. For example, I want you guys to think about the main idea of a passage or chapter. And for this case, I want you to think to yourself how you would summarize the short story, The Things They Carried. A good way to think about where you want to go with that summary is think about if someone asked you, well, what's this story about? right? And your answer could be the basis of your summary. So I want to show you my example of a summary of the things they carried. So let's look at it. Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried follows Lieutenant Jimmy Cross and his company of soldiers as they not only cope with the death of Ted Lavender, but also the physical and emotional burdens of the Vietnam War. Fairly simple, right? What makes this a good summary? Well, does it shorten the length from the original? Yes, of course it does, because I've taken that 14-page story and I've boiled it down to one sentence, right? So that's on my checklist. Do I give credit to my author through phrases of attribution? Yes, I do. I have Tim O'Brien, and I also mentioned the title of the story that I am summarizing. Is it without opinion? Is it just is it objective and highlight the main point? Well, I think so. I don't say this is a stupid story or this is a boring story or it's a complicated story. I just say that, it is a story that does, X, Y, and Z. So this is a good example of a summary. And also it's in my own words, right? Okay. So summary is great if you want to kind of get the gist of a larger piece of work. But there are limits to summary. Summary basically gives you the overall essence of an article or a larger section of a text. Think about it in terms of this. When you think about summary, right? It's the sum total of a piece of work or the sum total of a chapter or an article, right? But what if I want to do something that is a little more specific, or I want to focus on a particular passage or a particular scene or a particular instance in a text? For that, we want to think about using paraphrase. And you can kind of think about the difference between the two. Summary, sum total, paraphrase. What word does that look like? It looks kind of like paragraph, right? So if you want to focus on just a paragraph, you want to focus your attention to paraphrase. So what is a paraphrase? A paraphrase, like a summary, uses your own words, right? You are not using any of the words that the author uses, you're using your own. But unlike a summary, paraphrase rewords and kind of reimagines, I guess, a specific point or a detailed passage. In other words, a paraphrase is going to be more specific than a summary. But in order to paraphrase, there are certain requirements that you kind of have to meet. Like a summary, I already said, you want to make sure that you put the words in your own, put ideas in your own words, right? So take the passage and boil it down, shorten it, and put it in your own words. And when I say use your own words, you have to do more than just change a few words around. For example, you can't just go through a paragraph, right, and just look through the thesaurus and substitute the author's words with synonyms, right? You have to kind of change the whole structure around. And a lot of times, that's the real kind of tricky part of doing a paraphrase. So this week I'm going to ask you guys to get some practice in with your paraphrases. So some other requirements, like a summary, you have to give credit to the author, but unlike a summary, you have to create an internal or in-text parenthetical citation at the end of the sentence. So when you summarize something, it's enough to just mention the author and the title of the work. But when you're doing a paraphrase, you want to make sure that you have an in-text citation because it's a specific piece of the text that's found on a specific page, right? So let us talk more about the use of those internal in-text citations. The question that some of you may be asking yourself is, if I do a bunch of paraphrase, can I just do one citation for the entire paragraph? And to that, the answer is no. You want to make sure that for every piece of paraphrase that you use, you create an individual internal citation for each sentence that's reworded. Multiple citations within a single paragraph is normal and is expected. So anytime you paraphrase a specific passage, you want to make sure that that passage has its own individual in-text citation. So also normal and expected for a paraphrase are phrases of attribution or giving credit to. So for example, some phrases of attribution when paraphrasing pieces of the things they carried would be: O'Brien describes X, Y, and Z. The character Kiowa explains that he wishes he felt worse about, Ted Lavender's death. Jimmy imagines that he's on a beach with Martha, right? So those are examples of both paraphrases and phrases of attribution within that paraphrase. So let us look. I want you guys to turn to page 4 in the short story, The Things They Carried. Sorry, I had a brain freeze. Turn to page 4 on the PDF that I gave you. Find it, look at it, and it's the paragraph that begins with, the paragraph that I want to focus on is the paragraph that begins in the first week of April. And for the sake of ease, I am showing that one paragraph that I am talking about right here on this page. And in this paragraph, I'm assuming that you guys have read the story, we get Lieutenant Jimmy Cross receives a good luck charm from Martha, and it is this pebble, right? And he goes on to talk about this pebble and what she says about it in the accompanying letter, and how she carried it in her pocket and he found it romantic, and all of the things that he imagines about this pebble, and how he imagines her walking on the beach and finding it and all of that kind of thing. And then it says that he would slip into daydreams, just pretending, walking barefoot along the shore with Martha carrying nothing. He would feel himself rising, sun and waves, gentle winds, all love and lightness. So this is a pretty lengthy paragraph describing one or two specific main ideas, right? So if I wanted you guys, if we want to paraphrase this passage, right, what are the key kind of important key phrases or key ideas in this one paragraph? Well, Jimmy is important, right? Martha is important. This pebble is important. And the idea that he kind of daydreams, right, and imagines, daydreams. I guess I want to say that a keyword would be daydream, Martha, pretending, or whatever. So if those are kind of the key ideas that are in this passage, so you would want to avoid using any of those words like daydreams, pebble, violet, miniature egg, any of the specific words that the author uses. You want to avoid using in your paraphrase. So let's look at what a paraphrase of that passage might look like. All right, a small stone from Martha prompts sentimental daydreams for Jimmy Cross. He fantasizes about warm summer days back home and wonders about the life and woman he's left behind. What is this a good paraphrase? I would say it is, all except for one thing, and it's that use of the word daydreams, right? Because you can very clearly see in that paraphrase or that passage. Well, let me pull it up. I gotta find it again. Yeah, in that passage here is the word daydreams, right? So I want to substitute that word for one of my own. So, how about sentimental thoughts for Jimmy Cross, right? Because he does. He thinks about Martha. He fantasizes about, being with her and all that kind of thing. So now that I have made sure that all of my paraphrase is in my own words. Is it a good one? Well, yes, because let's think about all of the requirements that we need for our paraphrase. Own words, check. Is it smaller than the original? Check. Does it have a citation? Check. I've got my in-text citation here at the end. And does it have phrases of attribution? Sure it does, because here we have he fantasizes, and of course the he that I'm referring to is Jimmy Cross. So this is a good paraphrase. So I am going to ask you guys to look at this section beginning with on the morning after Ted Lavender died and ending with he was a soldier after all, page 13. So here I am on page 13 on the morning after Ted Lavender died. So beginning here and ending with here. One of your goals, one of your assignments for this week in the paraphrase practice is to paraphrase this section. So I want to kind of talk you guys through this for a minute before you guys kind of do your own paraphrase. What's the main idea of this passage? Well, Ted Lavender has died. Jimmy feels terrible. He digs this hole, right? Foxhole, and he burned the letters, the photographs in the hole. And then he talks about not burning blame. Besides the letters and all of that kind of thing, I want you guys to look at. I mean, that's the kind of gist of this passage, right? He feels terrible about Ted Lavender dying, especially because he feels it's his fault. He was distracted, and he's got to get rid of all of these distractions. And he does that in this kind of cathartic moment while he's in this foxhole. And I want you guys to think about in that passage phrases to avoid or words to avoid, such as the ones that are used in this particular passage, like photographs, foxhole, letters, burning, that kind of thing. So I'm reluctant to share with you my paraphrase because I don't want to unduly influence you. So I'm going to save that for after I get everybody's assignment turned in and all that, and then I'll share with you. We'll talk about your paraphrases once I've graded them. But those are and this is, like I said, why it's tricky with paraphrases, because you want to make sure that you use your own words. And really, like I said, It's not unlike summary in that you want to think about, well, what's the gist of this paragraph? How can I put this paragraph in my own words, right? So that is one of your assignments for this week, this idea of taking, um, not idea of taking, but paraphrasing. I'm asking you to do three, and one of them is this particular section. The other two sections that you choose to paraphrase are up to you. They're your choice. But I do want to mention very briefly, I know that I've talked for a pretty long time, and I'm going to wrap it up. But paraphrase is great when you want to kind of get the gist of a particular paragraph or a particular section or a particular scene. However, like there are limits with summary, there are limits to paraphrase. What if, the author just says something so good, so poignant that I really I can't recreate that. I can't get the gist of it. I've got to use that particular phrase. And very sparingly, right? It's okay and it's necessary to include the voice of the writer within your own writing. And to do that, we use direct quotations. And that, my dears, is going to be the focus of what we talk about next week in our second part of learning how to use the text. So let me know if you have any questions about paraphrasing. And I look forward to see what you guys come up with in regards to the passages that you choose and how you choose to rephrase them. But make sure you go through the checklist that is in Canvas in Canvas for your paraphrases and what's required. So with that, happy paraphrasing.